May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown. Hello, this is Cedric Dankwell Smythe. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all fans of the paranormal, the supernatural, the unusual, the entertaining, the terrifying, the horrifying, and those things that go bump in the night and in the daytime too. This is the one and only Paranormal Rundown, where the lads, the gang of nerds, choose from over 2,700 carefully curated paranormal topics. Tonight's rundown is called the Paranormal Rundown Smackdown. And as we only have two members of the gang of nerds available, Vic and Dave, they'll be doing things a bit differently. They'll be role-playing. No, nothing like that. But Vic will play the role of a devout atheist, a total materialist reductionist. Dave will play the opposite. And mainly, we talk about consciousness and dozens of aspects of that. Animal consciousness, plant consciousness, consciousness without a brain, consciousness of everyday objects. You name it, we talk about it. Including Magick with a K, remote viewing, and that classic movie, Cabin in the Woods. Get your consciousness ready and get on board. This train's a-leavin' right now.
Hello, everybody in Paranormal Rundown land. This is Vic Hermanson. We have an extremely poorly populated show tonight. It is simply myself, and it is Dave Griffith. Father Birdsong has just completed successful surgery, and JJ is wandering around in Japan. We decided that we would do things a little differently. Instead of going through the Paranormal Rundown list, which is now somewhere around 2,670 or so, and look, that number is going to change up and down. I'll go through the list and I'll find, two that are repeated. I'll find one and I'll say, why did I put that in there? Man, that was stupid. Take that out. And then I'll put some more in. So I think it's probably going to stagnate somewhere around 2,700, up, down. But anyway, we're calling tonight's episode the Paranormal Rundown Smackdown. And we are going to each assume a role. Like Django, when he was given his little blue boy outfit. I am going to assume the role of an atheist, materialist, someone who believes that if it can't be observed, if it can't be measured, if it can't be smelled, if it can't be somehow empirically demonstrated, then it doesn't exist.
And I'm for peace and love, man.
And he's for peace and love. And it's not that I'm against peace and love. It's just that I think it's something that simply comes from a rational human mind. And it is more rational to behave morally than to behave immorally. So that's my only reason for deciding to behave morally. But Dave feels differently. And so we're going to go through, I don't know, we have 10 or 12 of these written down, of the top concerns in the paranormal world. I mean, what are they really? And we are going to discuss those. Probably we're trying to be cordial with each other, although he's over there worshiping a sky daddy.
That's all you need. Just look up. It's all there, written in the stars for you.
It's
Vic.
all there. I actually have quite a few atheist friends, and I have told them that I'd really appreciate it if they didn't use the word sky daddy, because it made them look like idiots, and I don't want to think of them as idiots. But so that's what we're going to do tonight. We may, since we're doing a Smackdown, at the end, see if we can come up with a score as to where this topic fits in the realm of how likely is this to be the case. Now, I can almost guarantee you we're not going to do this perfectly. This is something.
We're going to do it in a very, very paranormal rundown way.
Paranormal rundown kind of way. But the other truth is, this is no different from 2 evenings a week that Dave and I have. Of our wives both go to bed a lot earlier than we do. And a lot of times we just sit here and shoot the breeze.
Contemplate the universe.
Contemplate the universe. Contemplate our navels.
I am not contemplating his navel, by the way. That is not what he meant.
So, here we go with the Paranormal Rundown Smackdown. And since I've had this ridiculously long introduction, I'm going to let Dave take off with it.
Well, you've got the list. So you wrote the list down. I don't have the list. I do believe that the first topic was consciousness.
The first topic. Yes, we were talking about everything proceeds from consciousness.
Okay. So
well, first off, you as a believer, has your belief in God giving you any deeper understanding of just what the heck consciousness is?
Well, consciousness is just our oneness with the universe.
Okay. Want to go a little deeper than that?
I suppose. It's what makes us feel good about everybody else. Now, all right. The reality is, consciousness to me is and we talked about this in our last episode. It is the degree to which we are able to think beyond the normal Zen-like state of existence. That ability to perceive ourselves as an independent actor from everything else, and then on top of that, to build on it, to think beyond the moment, to think about future things, to plan, to execute on a plan, to then come up with higher functions in terms of telling stories, thinking in the future, thinking in very abstract ways. All of that rolls into some level of consciousness. It is beyond the simple matter and acting of a physical being.
Is a cow conscious?
That's a good question. A cow may be conscious at a lower level. Now, the hippie in me would want to say, that cow has every bit as much consciousness as we do. You just can't perceive it. But
well, I'll have to be honest. I mean, that's one of those arguments that I can't refute.
But the non-hippie in me would say, at least, that cow has some sense of itself. There is some consciousness there, but it certainly doesn't have the level of consciousness that we as a human do.
Let me break in for a second, Dave. And this is not meant to argue directly with you. This is just to bring up a point that I think probably most people have never heard. There's a book that is a really good book that if you ever had the chance to read or listen to, you should do so. And it's called When Elephants Weep.
Well, I have heard that name, and it probably was from you. So what's the book about?
Well, there's a funny story before that. My boys and I went on we did the long trail in Vermont, and we did the last part of the Appalachian Trail up to Katahdin, and then we came down and did some in North Carolina. And so this was about a 700-mile hike by the time we got finished with it.
Wow.
And we were driving all around listening to these books that I had found at a store that was going out of business. And one was called When Elephants Weep. And so we all listened together. And it got to be a real joke because the person who would always introduce the chapters says, Welcome to When Elephants Weep by Susan McCarthy and Richard Musayev Mason. And this has become a catchphrase in our family. And somebody will say, who wrote that book? Richard McCarthy and Susan McCarthy and Richard Musayev Mason.
Nice.
And so he was in a philosophy class at the University of or NC State. And the professor started talking about, well, there's a book called When Elephants Cry. And Christopher pops up and says, no, it's called When Elephants Weep by Susan McCarthy and Richard Musayev Mason.
That's great.
And so apparently that was a fun day in class. But there was apparently a time when educated people did not feel that there was any consciousness in animals.
Okay.
And that they were not able to perceive pain, even. Well, I mean, if you've ever stepped on a dog's foot, or seen a lame horse or a cow with a nail in its foot, or any kind of animal, I mean, it's very clear to just anybody who's watching that animal is in pain.
Right.
So I'm not just trying to argue against that point. What I'm trying to argue against or talk about is the fact that science has not always been real astute in observing the world. Okay, so there were scientists writing in journals at the time that the idea that an animal feels or perceives pain is simply ridiculous.
It would seem to me that no matter what time in history you are, any person who has had to go out and kill for food would understand that animals have some level of consciousness.
Oh, I would agree. That the level of consciousness of, by golly, I don't want to die.
Correct. There is the atheist reductionist in you might have an opinion on that, and I'd like to hear it. But I have watched animals die, and when you hunt, you do your best to make it quick. That is, there's a lot of focus in how I was raised and how I raised my boys in terms of clean shots. You don't take shots that aren't clean. You do your best to end the animal's life as humanely as you can. But you get chances at some point to see one die up close. And you can see it in the animal. You can feel it. And you also see, mothers with babies and the reaction and interactions between them. You see stuff that, animals are creatures that are aware of relationships and themselves. Now, whether they're doing calculus in their minds while they're chewing their cud is up for debate. That's where I think it stops, right? I think that animals generally, at least what I've seen, that there's not this capability of master thinking, masterful control of their consciousness the way that we have. But I don't know.
Well, no. I mean, I don't think cows are doing calculus. But when a peregrine falcon is starting at an altitude of 1,000 feet, and it's aiming at another bird that's moving in some direction different from itself, and it's determining some arc through the sky that can be achieved simply by moving the tips of feathers and things like that, is that's going to come in at about 170 miles an hour, and it's not going to try to grab this thing and hold on to it. All it wants to do is come in at 170 miles an hour and get one claw where it can just rip right through that thing.
Right.
Okay, that's an incredible level of mathematical reasoning.
Is that mathematical reasoning?
I'm absolutely certain.
Or is that experience?
I think it's something that's, personally, I think it's something that's built into their brain. Okay, they don't. Of course, they're not sitting there, doing differentials and this sort of thing. But they are. The math to do that is in their brain. And
so I think that's a great example of the difference in higher levels of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The falcon or the eagle or whatever bird of prey isn't sitting there on a blackboard, as they're raising their little eaglets and writing geometry and algebraic equations to go along with it for distance and speed and all of this. They're not abstracting it in a way that is represented by anything other than, my mind says that if I go this way at this speed and drop at that angle, I will get the prey.
Right. And they do something like 95% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have a 100% success record, but for the most part, their brains get them right to that prey.
Well, I would say there are probably factors that aren't in their control.
Mm-hmm.
Winds,
humidity,
then effect of that on the feathers,
wear of
who
feathers,
knows, right?
Things like that. So, well, the consciousness that you see in humans, and I've written these words down that you used: awareness, perception, connection, planning, higher level thought.
Higher level thought. That's really what it comes down to, is that abstract things beyond the physical in front of you, along with the ability to move past what you see and think of a reality that is not what you see.
Is that something that is possible without the presence of a deity?
Well, it's all God, man. Come on.
Well, of course.
You're supposed to answer that question.
I'm trying to get your perspective on this. I mean, remember, God doesn't. I'm like Laplace, okay, where the king, or I guess it was Napoleon, is looking at Laplace's report, and he says, "I don't see anything in here at all about God." And Laplace says, "I found no need of that in my calculations."
All right. So does that require a deity or God? Let's just stick with God. I'm Christian. We'll use, my Jesus-loving perspective on the world. And I'll put on some rose-colored shades and grow my hair long. Listen to the Grateful Dead, which I do actually love.
That's a good idea.
All right. So I believe so.
You believe that is possible without God?
Oh, no. I believe it requires God.
Oh, okay.
I believe it requires God. I think that, first of all, we're God's creation, and God created us with the ability to have that higher thought, to have those higher levels of consciousness. And he didn't create the platypus with that ability. He made the platypus very interesting, but, he didn't give it the ability to write Shakespeare or, create whatever other visions. Now, maybe it's thinking them and we just can't see it because their physical bodies aren't able to express it. But I would think, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about this, but I would think that if they were able to have those higher levels of consciousness, you would be able to come up with a hypothesis in their behavior and the environments they create, and see that play out. to where something about how they live in their environments, whether patterns, the way they nest, the way they do something, would have some expression of that higher level of consciousness. And I don't think we see that.
Okay. Well, let me take my turn then, or a turn. Remember, you get as many turns. This is the rundown. You get as many turns as you want.
Exactly.
If you find something you just don't want to go down and talk about, that's fine also. But as a atheist, materialist, reductionist, it's almost union rules that I adopt the following position. And that position is that there is no consciousness other than the physical interaction between the components of the brain. Consciousness is an emergent phenomenon. I always get those two mixed up. Is an emergent phenomenon that's just simply chemical and electrical activity forming a gestalt bigger than any of those impulses. How that happens, I can't tell you. But I can tell you this much: God's not involved. And as soon as you take away the ability to get rid of those impulses and those neurons and your glial cells and all that, consciousness goes away and it can't ever come back.
Well, if you get rid of all those things, don't you die?
Well, yes, you do.
So there's no way to test your theory.
No, of course not. That's a hypothesis. And there is no way to
test. That conversation earlier. Yes. No way to test your hypothesis.
There's no way to test the hypothesis.
I'm a hippie, man. Give me a break.
Except we can't see any indication that the behaviors that are associated with consciousness continue after death. There are people around who see that there are illusions, or who create illusions to believe they see some indication of consciousness after death, but they don't.
Well, I have to tell you, as I was poking around with the new Paranormal Rundown X account today, which if our listeners are wondering,
in case you didn't get that, there is now a Paranormal Rundown X account, and I guess it's just Paranormal Rundown,
it's
right?
At Paranormal Run DN. It wasn't long enough to allow for the full rundown.
Yes. Paranormal Run DN. Okay.
Yep.
And since you are conscious, you'll be able to understand that DN means down.
Maybe. So I ran across a video. This guy was, and I'll have to go back and look and re-exit, I suppose, repost it, of this, I don't know if it was a neurologist or a scientist or what, talking about, I was looking at the God helmet stuff, and it wasn't a God helmet, but these doctors were using a helmet that measured it was like an intense EEG readings. Yeah. The person was all hooked up, and he happened to die while they were doing their testing.
Whoa, okay. That's a rare observational opportunity.
Yes. And so what they saw was, at the moment, there was all this crazy brain activity until the heart stopped, right?
Right. Fear and anger.
Heart stopped. Everything went quiet.
Even all the EEG went quiet.
Yeah, at a certain point. I'm sure it wound down a little bit, but
okay.
But then there was a massive burst of activity that was afterwards. Now, this guy's thought was that was potentially the soul leaving the body.
Potentially, yeah.
And so there may be some sort of, we just need another person to put on a helmet and die. We're taking volunteers. But
yes.
But
doesn't pay very well.
Does well, it pays great, but we'll send you the check in the mail. But that was an interesting. I didn't dig into it. I have to go back. I was just scanning stuff, right? I was just adding.
This was a neurologist that you were.
I don't know if it was a neurologist but it was in the medical setting.
Well, it could have even just been like an EKG technician.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, an EKG technician over the years will do thousands of EKGs or EEGs, and
yes, EEGs. That's correct.
Electroencephalogram. EKG is actually the European words for an electrocardiogram, which in the United States is generally thought of as ECG. Doesn't matter. We're talking about a machine that's measuring many channels of brainwave activity.
Correct.
Sometimes they will use EEGs in conjunction with real-time in conjunction with MRIs or CAT scans.
Yeah, some imaging,
PET scans, this kind of thing. But what you're talking about is massive EEG activity at the end, chaotic, exaggerated EEG activity.
Right. And then quiet.
And then a
burst of activity. That was different than the chaotic. I don't know. This was a quick video. I just happened to run across it. I'll have to go back and watch the whole thing. But it was interesting.
Well, that was simply artifacts. It was the, the EEG technician didn't have the machine calibrated correctly, or bumped into it, or something.
Oh, you're going there. It was a bug in the system. Okay,
bug in the system, and of course, we have an N of 1, Dave. What do you expect me to? You expect me to get real excited about an N of 1?
No, I don't. Which is why, again, we're taking volunteers.
Now, well, it also doesn't seem to me. Well, look, families are very funny about this kind of thing, as are people. But if a reasonable, pleasant researcher were to start contacting people who were within a few days of dying,
absolutely,
and saying, "Hey, listen, we'd like to be able to monitor your brainwave activities as you die. We'll use this in a study. You'll remain entirely anonymous. We'll do this as respectfully and as unobtrusively as we can. And we'll, if your family wants the data, we'll share it with them. We'll follow all the ethical rules."
Mm-hmm.
I bet you within a year you could get an N of 50.
I bet you could easily get that.
Yeah.
I bet you could easily get that.
Maybe an
be
N of 100.
Motivated to do it.
Yeah, you got to be motivated to do it. So somebody out there needs to be writing a grant proposal, and make it very good, because they are being more heavily scrutinized now.
Yes, indeed.
They're being more heavily scrutinized now. But, I find that to be a fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting when I ran across it.
A fascinating thing.
But to take it back to consciousness as a whole, if you take the assumption that other humans experience what you experience, which is not a guarantee. I could be the only person here who has consciousness, and you are just part of the system around me that is,
yeah, but that would make you a solipsist, and I don't spend much time dealing with solipsism, and I think there's a good reason for that.
Yeah. But it's assuming that, other humans have the same experiences, and again, I go back to, it's expressed in the way that we live, in the artifacts that we create. You can tell. We write about it. We have, movies and books and art and all of these things. So what is it? And what are the bounds of it? There's a lot to consciousness. To me, for the paranormal, is at the root of everything. And then So, if you understood consciousness better, you would understand many of the other paranormal things better. But it's a very, what do I want to say? It's a very hazy picture that we have of it. We don't know how it works. We don't know why it works. We don't know. I mean, you can theorize that, it's a artifact of evolution that is intended to help us progress. But I think that we have all of this because it's a gift of God.
Well, if that is a gift of God, I will say thank you, God. But I believe I would have consciousness even if God weren't there. I did know somebody one time who was a real solipsist. I mean, a genuine, that was her genuine belief system.
And solipsis is the belief that you are the only one.
Well, solipsism, I'll give you the actual, the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. Which, only my mind exists. That's all I can know, and so I'm just going to assume that's all there is. Now, you can interact with me, so you must be some figment of my mind. You must be, some kind of illusion that I find useful. Don't know why, but, well, I mean, I got to admit, your view of consciousness is much deeper and more intriguing than is mine.
The chemical, electrical processes in the brain.
The chemical electrical processes, it's really kind of hard to take it much past that. I guess I can try to begin to learn ways of managing that, maybe of amplifying that. But the amplification comes through the actions that I take in the world, the things that I do. Why do you think it is that the God that I contend does not exist finds it preferable for a meatbag like Dave or a meatbag like Victor to be conscious?
Well, because that's where all the interesting things are. Because with consciousness is choice. And without choice, life is very boring. It's just reaction, action and reaction. And so if you're going to have a creation and you want to love that creation and experience that creation and treat it like children and hope that they grow and improve and become better, they have to have the ability to choose. They have to choose. They have to know right from wrong. Without consciousness, you don't know right from wrong. And I mean higher levels. That is a higher level of consciousness, the choice of right from wrong. A deer doesn't know right from wrong. A bear, a toad. They are. And they have drives. They don't know anything else. So if you want to set up a system of creation where you simply look and watch and see how it plays out, well, that might be interesting. But you can explain everything. You can explain everything that happens. Oh, well, that one was hungry, so they went over there and ate. And that one was going through, estrus. They were in their mating season, so they went off and did something else. That is, you can tie every activity back to the physical drives that they have. But when you put choice in there of right and wrong, now you have something interesting to watch, to experience, and to love when they make, love either way, but especially when they make the right choice.
Well, I've had two images pop in my mind while you're talking. One, I'm thinking about a child, human child, my child. And the idea that popped in my mind was, what if right at the point of birth I fitted that child with an exoskeleton?
Mm-hmm.
And the exoskeleton doesn't have the purpose of helping them lift rocks or anything. It's to limit what they can do, so they can never make the wrong choice. Okay,
Right.
So this child is running across the playground, and the exoskeleton has extreme artificial intelligence, and it realizes that, oh, he's getting ready to go hit Susie. Well, brakes go on. Sorry, no hitting of Susie. Okay, I will allow you to walk over to Susie and say something kind to her, but you can't hit Susie.
Right. Or say
Okay,
something mean.
Or say something mean, right? Of course, I've got control of his vocal muscles and control of his vocal cords, and but I don't see any way that even the best exoskeleton could ever stop the thought of, man, I want to hit Susie.
Yes.
All right, so if you were to live like that, where either every action you made was what the suit considered to be the optimal action, or you were forced into the optimal action by the suit, I don't think you would remain sane very long.
No.
This is one thing I really do love about the Rundown, is I've never heard that particular argument articulated anywhere. Have you?
No.
I mean, about the full control exoskeleton. The full control exoskeleton. I'm going to come out of character here for a minute. We even talked about having two voices for, when I was talking in atheist mode and when I was talking in Vic mode. But that is actually worth some thought. It's, the utter control exoskeleton. If every human being on Earth is fitted with that exoskeleton right at birth. And I guess the other thing you could do is you could have something implanted in the, immediately implanted in the corpus callosum, where it's, catching every thought that runs through the brain. And as soon as it catches a thought that's like, I'm going to go hit Susie, or I'm going to rob the store, or I'm not going to eat my vegetables, or...
Well, and this is what reading did for me growing up. I remember a book. It's along the same lines, and I think we've talked about it once before, and I don't remember the author right offhand, so don't ask. But it was two worlds. One world had these psychics that lived in it that would sort of like put themselves in this water sort of way to take away the world from around them, and they would focus on the other planet, and they would right every wrong in the planet. And they had the ability to stop things from happening. And then they also had the ability to
force things to happen.
To erase memories. So little Tommy goes running along and trips and falls and breaks his leg. Compound fracture. Horrible experience. They pick little Tommy up, put his leg back together, heal him, and then erase the memory of anything horrible ever happening.
Wow.
Okay.
I wish you remember the name of this book.
I will try to find it. The Worthington Chronicles, I believe, is the name of it.
Well, let's see if we can just look that up real quick. The Worthing Chronicle. Science fiction novel, American writer Orson Scott Card.
There we go.
My man.
It was one of the big ones.
Yeah, my man. I haven't read this. Plot summary. Jason Worthing and one of his descendants, Justice, go to a small village in a backward world to get a boy named Laird to write a book for them. The book is about why Abner Dune destroyed the Empire and the planet Capital, and why Jason's descendants destroyed the planet Worthing. It also explains why people all over the settled part of the galaxy are no longer being protected by God from pain and hardship.
Yep, that's it. Good. Wow.
Okay.
I actually remembered something from a long time ago. So they stopped doing this at one point, and then everything just went to hell in a handbasket because people were all of a sudden experiencing pain, bad things are happening, and everything else. But before that, this world was perfect. Nobody ever got hurt. Every bad thing was erased from their memories. It was perfect. But you can't live like that.
No.
If you go back to the Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the first world they made for them was perfect. Everybody
Correct.
was happy, had whatever they need, and you rejected it.
Humans rejected that. Yes. They had to have a certain amount of pain
Got to have conflict.
in order to accept the Matrix.
Yes. Have to have challenges, conflict. I think that the human mind, the consciousness of our characters, who we are, our souls, has to have challenge. It has to have decisions to make right and wrong, and it's got to feel the effects of those decisions.
See, it's really hard for me to argue from the atheist position because it goes so much against my actual beliefs and thoughts, which didn't come yesterday. I mean, it's not like I just last week decided I would start trying to figure out the world. I've been doing this since I was 8.
Yes.
I mean, I really have. And, you know, I've gone through, I went through an atheist phase. I went through at least a phase where I wanted people to believe that I was atheist.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to believe I was atheist. I became a real little snotty bastard. And
That was the atheist phase, huh?
you know, and I would say things, you know, somebody would say to me like, well, why don't you pray? And I would say, pray? Why in the world would you waste your time doing that? I said, what am I praying to? The great nothing? I mean, I like I said, snotty bastard. And I can accept that that's what I was. But I couldn't stay there because I didn't find any empirical reason to stay there.
And a whole lot of feelings, emotions, and justification in the world to not stay there.
Right. And so I didn't. But I can kind of get myself back in that frame of mind. Feel a bit dirty when I do.
That's all right. You can take a paranormal rundown shower afterwards. You'll
Take
be
a
fine.
paranormal rundown shower. Okay. We obviously have not covered consciousness, you know, even 1/1,000,000th of 1% of what it would take to properly cover consciousness.
Oh, we could do 100 episodes and not get there.
We
I
could
will
do-
say that one thing I'd like your opinion on is the middle ground. The middle ground between the atheist and the believer when it comes to consciousness. Right? The
Well, I guess you
believer,
would call
you're
that
given
the-
consciousness. The atheist, it doesn't exist. But there are physicists out there
Mhm.
that believe that it is fundamental.
Yes, and you're talking about, say, someone like Thomas Campbell.
Right. But I even somebody not as controversial as he is. I've heard this from multiple physicists out on YouTube at different points. Don't ask me who or when. That I won't remember. I'll remember a book from when I was 20, but not a YouTube video from last week.
Yeah, same for me.
But there is this idea that consciousness is additive. That it's a fundamental part of any given element in this universe, in this reality. And then as you start stacking those quarks and protons and cells and everything else, it becomes more consciousness. And then
So from a quark to the largest star in the universe.
Yes.
I mean, there must be out there a star that is the largest star that's ever existed.
Well, there has to be.
Yeah, well, something has to exist out there that's the largest.
And when it dies, the next largest will now be the largest.
The next largest. And I think about this with ocean creatures, whales, things we may not even know about. But somewhere out there, let's say it's a blue whale. It's a bigger blue whale than any other blue whale that's ever existed.
Yep. And it may not even hold a candle to the Loch Ness Monster.
May not even hold a candle to the Loch Ness Monster. And, most people would assume that blue whale, having a really big, fairly complicated brain, has a pretty high level of consciousness.
Well, you would think. But
I've seen what you would think of as moral behavior with cetaceans. Okay, where a child is drowning. There's a child in the water that cannot swim. Dolphin comes along, holds that child up.
Absolutely.
That's a conscious decision, or it seems to be a conscious decision.
That is a higher level. That does seem to be a higher level of consciousness.
Right. I can't see how there would be any evolutionary advantage to saving drowning members of another species that occasionally put spears in you.
And then not eating them.
Right. right. But there definitely is a moral reason for saving another conscious sapient being.
So dolphins would definitely be higher up on the scale.
Dolphins would be higher up on the scale. I always think of stars. I actually do think of stars. Okay, so I mean, I don't think there's anything special about the matter that we're made of. We're carbon, we're neon, we're argon a little bit, we're nitrogen. We're made of stuff. Mm-hmm. Just elements. There's nothing special about the elements we're made of. A star, hydrogen, helium, all the way up to iron. And when you get supernovas, then the star dies, and you end up with things like gold and uranium and stuff like that. But there's nothing special about the matter. Why wouldn't it be able to develop geometry within itself that would allow what we call consciousness? Well, now, there's no evidence of that, but I don't see anything precluding it.
And that would be the atheist perspective, right?
That would be the atheist perspective. Get enough stuff together.
That came out much more naturally from you than you expected, didn't it?
Also, I would look at it as, for those religious people listening, especially if you're tremendously fundamentalist, I am a believer in evolution. Evolution to me is a beautiful idea that I think is part of God's approach to how worlds develop. Okay,
I'm still on the fence.
Okay, that's fine. Well, wait. You didn't do it right. You're supposed to call me a heathen or something when I say that.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry, man.
Well, I mean, you've got to adopt all mystical positions, all the way from Freedom Sunshine. What was her name? Freedom
Sunshine. Yeah.
All right. Let me break in just real quickly. If you've listened to the Paranormal Rundown, look, even though Dave and I are playing it fast and loose, this is no more fast and loose than it normally is. This is just right down. This is just right down rundown lane, man.
Yes, it is.
But there's a movie out there that you ought to find and you ought to watch, and it's called PrayTV. It's made about 1980, and it's about a TV station somewhere that's failing. And Dabney Coleman comes along and says, all right, let's turn this into a TV station all about religion. We have all religions. And man, it is funny.
Oh, it is. I just saw clips of it. I've got to go see the whole thing. But it was good.
It is very funny. But all right, you were getting ready to interrupt me there.
Yeah, sorry. The thing that I find difficult about the idea of what would you call that? Compounding consciousness.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good term.
Is that you don't see larger creatures that are necessarily exhibiting higher levels of consciousness. You know, there are plenty of alligators that are a lot bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not.
But they've got a brain the size of
drawing beautiful artwork in the mud here in Florida. But
they've got a brain the size of a little bigger than a peanut, a little smaller than a walnut.
But see, that's not the theory. Because the theory is everything has a fundamental consciousness to it. And the more stuff you put together, the more consciousness you get. This is how you wind up with conscious plants. Now let's talk about conscious plants.
Okay. It's been on my mind all day.
Well, you know, those green plants I got hanging out back.
Well, you know,
when I sing to them, boy, they grow mighty purty.
You got to set up Mozart out there. Get your speakers out there. Get some weatherproof speakers, and they're, you know, playing Eine kleine Nacht music. And you've got to go out there and say affirming things to them. You know, like, you have extremely firm and beautiful pistils.
No, I am not going to title this episode "You Have Firm Pistols," but boy, that does stand out. But yeah, so boy, there's a lot of people that will say, and I haven't tried this. I really should try it. You know, the separate environments. One environment you go in and sing and say loving things to your plants, and the other environment you go in and scream at them all day. But there are people that say you will absolutely see a difference. Everything else the same. The plants you scream at will stunt and wilt and not be happy, and the ones you say loving things to and sing to will just flourish.
I'm just trying to think, what is of all the music you know of, what's the most horrible? I mean, you know, death punk.
Yeah, there's some death metal that I don't particularly
some
like.
Really, really horrible music. So you play that.
Yeah.
You know, Bad Brains, 9 Inch Nails.
I actually kind of like 9 Inch Nails. But, you know, but setting that aside.
Okay, but no, anyway.
The real clashing stuff, right? The
very, very
distorted, unpleasant. I
nothing
don't know.
Melodious.
What would that be? Would that be? So that's a question. Would the type of music affect it?
Well, let's say that you wanted to stunt your neighbor's plants. He goes to work in the morning. Every day you go out there with a portable speaker, Bluetooth, it can get loud, and you play something horrible.
Right.
Okay, all day long. And with your speakers, you know, you play Mozart, and you come in with some Beethoven, and maybe a little bit of Jim Croce and stuff.
Ripple by the Grateful Dead, right? American Beauty. That's a great
right.
album. Very happy, very
happy.
chill.
And then at the end of a month, you look at your crops.
My plants would be trucking.
Look, I'm sure there have been studies done on this.
I think there have, and I think that they have sort of seen some degree of this actually impacting the plants. But the theory about the consciousness, or the Well, no, it would still be a theory, right? Because it's beyond one individual
observation.
Test, yeah. Anyway, the theory is that everything has consciousness. And, the more you have, you stack it up, the more consciousness you get. Maybe you stack it up in certain patterns, you get different levels of consciousness. I don't know. But this is how you would scientifically explain conscious plants. There's no brain in them at all. So do you have to have a brain to have consciousness?
Well, speaking as an atheist, materialist, reductionist, well, of course you've got to have a brain to have consciousness. Things are built to do particular things. Your toenail doesn't have consciousness. All it's got is dead keratin. There's nothing in your toenail that's going to allow you to develop, deeper thought and consciousness, but your brain does. Your brain's got all these specialized, wonderful structures that are working in incredible harmony together to guide you through life and to give you an understanding and appreciation, however short that may be, of life. And that to me that's part of evolution. Evolution strives to create creatures and keep them alive for a long time, or as long as we can. Well, one of the ways I'm keeping you alive is by giving you the feeling of loving and appreciating all of this. Of course, it's an illusion, but your body still responds in terms of, I want to stay alive.
Right.
So the reason that the crocodile can't develop higher consciousness, even though it's got more crocodile stuff, is because the crocodile brain is puny.
And how big is a dolphin's brain?
A dolphin's brain is bigger than ours, but it's not composed of the same stuff. Okay, we've got X percentage of, and I don't know these percentages, of glial cells, which is the connective tissue of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's what holds all these active neurons together. The dolphin has a much higher percentage of glial cells that hold together a smaller portion of neurons. They're still smart. They're very, very smart. They can be trained to do some astounding things, like strap a bomb on their back and go find a German ship and blow it up.
That is an interesting use of dolphins, but yes.
That's an interesting use of dolphins. And they seem to be able to do altruistic things, and they seem to be able to form, strong bonds with other dolphins. Killer whales now have figured out that they don't like yachts in certain parts of the world. And so yachts are being attacked by orcas.
I had heard about orca attacks. I a couple of them, but that's a big time thing now, huh?
But I'm not sure it's a big time. I don't think there are tens of thousands of events, but they're enough to make the news and to make someone a little leery about taking a yacht out where the orcas are.
Well, I will be sure to keep my yacht in the waters of Florida.
Which are probably a little too warm for the orcas.
Probably. All right, so where do we go from here? Consciousness begets what? What's on the list?
Well, what's next on the list, if you want the truth, actually, is the Akashic Record, or Akashic Record.
Ah.
Okay, so let me at least see if I can properly explain what that is. And I guess the idea, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is the idea of universal knowledge that any mind can tap into through some method, which I don't know.
Right.
I remember Edgar Casey talking about, as he was diagnosing his patients, that he would always access the Akashic or Akashic Record. And if you know how to say that word, please let us know.
I say Akashic. Vic says Akashic.
Yeah, Akashic, let's call the whole thing off. but that's about all I know about the Akashic Record. I know George Norrie says there's a special chamber underneath the foot of the Sphinx, and that's where the actual Akashic Record is stored.
A physical one versus the invisible.
Yeah, the invisible, ethereal,
theoretical one,
spiritual, whatever one.
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking about essentially knowledge of all events throughout time.
That'd be a handy thing to have.
Past and maybe future. And so people are theoretically able to access this if they go into some sort of meditative state and gain insight, and I assume that is through focusing their intent on what they want to know and then receiving that information, which goes into sort of that psychic or medium type of activity where you're finding something that you're not able to figure out any other way. You don't know from your life, and that's the name that's given to it. I don't know where it came from, but
I'm sure Annabelle can let us know.
It is
or Avalon.
referenced.
Avalon.
Pick the right podcast, Vic.
Pick the right podcast. Yeah. You bring Beelzebub in, let him talk about it.
You got to pick the right creepy little girl. Nothing personal, Avalon.
Or the right redneck demon.
Yeah. So there's also this idea of, universal consciousness, which sort of covers the same thing. And that's that all of our consciousnesses are connected. They're all part of the same thing. And
by what?
By God, Vic, have you not been paying attention?
Well, I have. But I, being a scientist, I need to know if these two things are connected, what's connecting them? Now, a reasonable answer might be spooky action at a distance.
Spooky action at a distance.
Okay. Well, we
does
don't
not give you complex thoughts.
Well, not one.
Okay.
But I'm not seeing any limits on the number of SAAADs, spooky action at a distance. SAAD. I'm not seeing any sign that says you can only have 216 SAADs today. You can have as many SAADs as you want.
What connects those SAADs?
Nobody knows. Spins of electrons. Spins
you're back
of
to explaining it with something that you cannot explain.
Yes, that's true, and that is so astute of you. And I want everybody to understand that that's definitely one of the rules on Trailer Trash Terrors. And I think it's a good idea for it to be a rule on the Paranormal Rundown is if you're to the point where you are explaining one unknown thing with another unknown thing, then you're lost.
No, that's not a Paranormal Rundown thing. We wander through the rabbit holes and the quirky systems of the universe and wormholes and stuff. None of it has to be connected. We can explain it with whatever we feel like.
So Harry Houdini although he was a great illusionist and a really, really great escape artist and probably a spy. Once again, Vic Hermanson talking. If you've never read a good book about Harry Houdini, go get you one and read it, because he's one of the more fascinating people that ever lived. And if you're basing your understanding of Houdini on the old Tony Curtis movie, nah, that didn't get any of that right. But he spent actually most of his life trying to debunk psychics. I mean, really, really trying to debunk psychics, and also to find one that was real.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Houdini really did fool people. Arthur Conan Doyle thought 100% that Houdini was really magic, really was doing the things he was showing on stage. So the man who wrote Sherlock Holmes was convinced that Harry Houdini was dematerializing out of the chains and the boxes and the milk cans and the Chinese water torture trick. And that's how he got out.
Holmes would have been so disappointed.
Holmes would have been disappointed. But, and of course he was just an incredible showman, but he wanted so much to find somebody who could actually do something psychic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe he ever did. There are some people who say that, as he was dying, he made a pact with his wife, that there was a secret message that he wanted to communicate to her. And it was her job to go find a psychic that could reveal the secret message. And some say that there was a psychic who did that. I don't believe Bess ever just came out clearly and said, yes, a psychic has found the secret message of Houdini.
Hello, this is Avalon Leanne Dankworth Smythe. It's probably difficult for modern audiences to realize just how beloved and influential Harry Houdini, or Eric Weiss, the son of a rabbi, was toward the end of his career. He was the highest paid entertainer in the world. He died of a burst appendix in 1926. Bess, his beloved wife, continued her seances until 1936. That was the end of the 10-year pact. There was actually a Hollywood movie made about her quest to be contacted by Houdini. Here is the most critical part of that movie, starring Bess Houdini herself.
Mary. Yes, madame. There will be no more seances, Mary. Oh, I'm so sorry that they've proven a failure. But they haven't. Not exactly. Mary, you knew my husband a long time. Oh, yes, madame. And you remember what he always said about these things? That it was impossible for the dead to return. This proves he was right. For if it would have been possible, I would have had some sign from him in the past 10 years. Well, that is over. But I would have loved to have talked with him just once.
Okay. Well, and if it was in the Akashic Record, he wouldn't have needed to die for a psychic to find it.
Whoa. Okie dokie. That's right. Everything. All right. So he's talking to Bess with that, hey, Bess, I'm going to be dying in the next 10 years, probably, maybe 20. Hey, maybe even 25 if I am lucky. But if I die, I want to be able to get a message back to you. And here's the message. Memorize it. When I die, find a psychic, see if they can figure it out.
Right.
Okay, well, so if the Akashic Record exists and the psychic can go out there and get it, that seems to mean that all future events are already determined.
Well, no. What it would mean is he's already said it to Bess, and therefore it's in the record. He doesn't have to die in order for another psychic to find, because he gave her the message before he died, right? So the message coming through a psychic was going to be a confirmation that he existed after his death, yes? So really, we're probably talking about a medium rather than a psychic.
Okay, well, for the unsophisticated atheist, what's the difference between the two?
Well, psychic is finding or experiencing or learning things that are unknown. Right? A psychic can tell you, this happened to you when you were a child.
Okay.
You don't have to be dead in order for the psychic to ask you that. A medium is acting as a go-between between someone who's dead and someone who's alive. Although I suppose they could be a go-between between two people that are dead. But
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
that's necessary.
Are the union rules against that or something? But
Yeah, and the pay's probably not as good.
you want to hear the message?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the code was Rosabelle, answer, tell, pray, answer, look, tell, answer, tell.
Well, at least it was not something that was confusing and it was easy to remember.
Well, apparently it was part of a code that magicians use to communicate things to their assistants.
Ah, well, that would make sense. So she would be familiar with that type of
She'd be familiar with that. And
memorization anyway.
It says, Houdini and Bess agreed to use the code to communicate if he died first. The code was a secret spelling system used by magicians to communicate with their assistants during mentalism acts. Each word or word pair corresponded to a letter. For example, answer was the letter B, and answer was the letter V.
Okay.
And so he was spelling out believe. And Rosabelle was what he engraved in her wedding ring before they got married.
Okay. So now he's created this code. He's told it to her. It should be in the Akashic Record. So a psychic, someone who is able to tap in to the Akashic Record, should be able to glean that message long before he dies. Should be able to glean it as soon as it's been said, because it exists.
Is there any necessity that the information placed in the Akashic Record be of value?
I have no idea. I don't know the librarian.
Well, I'm just thinking there's so much data, so much stuff we talk about that I can't see why there'd be any good reason to preserve it forever.
Well, just because it's not important to you doesn't mean it's not important to somebody else.
Grocery lists?
Well, maybe you bought something at the store that I needed, and because I didn't get it, I died. And I'm trying to figure out, why did I die?
Dave, I don't want that guilt on my shoulders. Look, I'm telling you, man, it's getting too much. I can't deal with all this guilt. But
There's no guilt. You're an atheist reductionist. There's no guilt, because guilt is a figment of our imagination. We may need to switch places here.
well, just because I don't believe in God doesn't mean I'm not neurotic.
Well, okay, that's fair.
So, all right, I don't think we can take the Akashic Record a lot further than that.
Hello, one and all. This is Billy Blankenship Fudge, special trans-temporal news correspondent to the Paranormal Rundown, bringing you news today from Friday, January 9th, 1914, from the Kansas City Star. A New Thought wedding. the first New Thought wedding within the last few thousand years, according to the officers of the church, will take place in New Aeolian Hall Sunday morning when Miss Eveline Smith of Denver becomes the New Thought bride of P.G. Menzel of New York. The ceremony, it was asserted, has been preserved since prehistoric times, only in Akashic Records, or Akashic, or Akashic, I'm going with Akashic Records, or on the harmonious vibrations of the air. It has been interpreted and will be performed by R.W. Sears, minister of the New Thought Church. The couple met through the application of the law of harmonious vibrations. Mr. Sears maintains they have been treated under the ritual and have been found to be a perfect New Thought pair. In the ceremony, the bride and groom will make no vow to love, honor, and obey, but will promise their own soul conscious they will do so. In the ceremony, the history of the New Thought Church will be told, and there will be other and myriad strange features. Oh, and I assure you they were so very, very strange indeed. Until next time, this is Billy Blankenship Fudge, signing off from 1914. For the Paranormal Rundown.
So
No, but let's explore one more area of this.
Of the Akashic Record?
Yeah, and consciousness and universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Remote viewing.
Aha! Ingo Swann and Major Ed Dames.
I mean, this is the thing. There is
whom I
no
really
question.
wanted to hunt down and punch in the nose one time.
Oh, really? Why is that?
I think he's well, I think he is a horrible opportunist.
Okay.
I really do, and I think he probably brings about actual harm to the world, or used to.
Okay.
I don't know where Ed Dames is now.
No idea.
But do you remember we'll get back to this in general, but do you remember the period of time when he dominated the Art Bell show?
No. I was an occasional Art Bell listener, never enough to, notice normal trends or regular guests or anything like that.
Well, he was the primary guest on the Art Bell show for, a good long time. 3, 4, 6 week period.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during the Hale-Bopp comet passed by.
Okay.
And Hale-Bopp was a complicated comet. It had a central core, and then it had a companion that had some kind of smaller piece of rock or ice or whatever following it. And according to Ed Dames, that smaller piece was going to break off, come toward the Earth, distribute a poison that would kill all plant life on Earth, and we would all die.
Mm-hmm. And he knew this through remote viewing?
He knew this through remote viewing. Yeah. This is what he had remote viewed.
Guessing he got that one wrong.
He got everything wrong. I never saw a dang thing that Ed Dames said on the Art Bell show that actually happened. Never saw anything. And of course, he was spending most of that time when he wasn't talking about horribly destructive acts or occurrences. He was talking about, well, you need to spend me $500 and I'll send you my remote viewing kit. My remote viewing kit. And I'm sure he sold a lot of those things. He was pretty famous there for a while.
Yeah, well.
And then do you know who Leland Kaiser is or was?
Mm-mm.
Leland Kaiser was a business motivational speaker.
Okay.
He became pretty famous there for a while, but he got into this remote viewing stuff. And I can remember going to a business seminar where he gets up and he's, talking about, how to maximize profit and how to maximize your employees and all this. And then he started talking about, well, let's talk about remote viewing, where you can learn things about other companies.
Yeah, your competition.
Your competition, this kind of thing. And that was quite a while ago. So I don't know what's happened to him. But anyway, you were the one who started to talk about remote viewing, and then as usual, I hijacked you.
No, that's quite all right. That is interesting. So your take on remote viewing is the whole thing's a sham?
No.
Or just these individuals were?
The Ed Dames was a sham, specifically. Ingo Swann, I don't know. I mean, Ingo Swann was able to convince someone in government to spend a lot of money.
There are people who have come out of that program. I remember reading or seeing an interview with one of them who talked about the effectiveness of it, that, it was a real thing. It wasn't, although maybe that was Ed Dames?
Ed Dames. Maybe that was Ed Dames.
Maybe that was Ed Dames.
Well, what were they getting? I mean, were they getting Russian launch codes? Were they getting...
They were getting intel on locations. They would look, a new building would be put up in a secure area, and they would look and see, well, what's in that building? What are we looking at? What are they building? What are they doing? I don't know. But
and they had confidence that this information was correct?
Yeah, I thought some of it was confirmed through later covert ops.
Do you know anybody who claims to be able to remote view?
Not personally.
I mean, that seems like somebody we should find as a guest.
Not personally. I'm trying to remember if I ran into somebody on Discord who said that was part of what they do. But I don't remember. Okay, so there's a request out there to the listeners. If you have successfully remote viewed, we'd love to have you on. That would be a fun conversation to have. And assuming you've gone that far down the rabbit hole, I'm sure you've got lots of thoughts on other paranormal stuff as well. So I know there's plenty of stuff on the internet about it. People who teach how to do it. You can find the original manuals from the Department of Defense.
Okay, I am right now joining on Facebook, Remote Viewing the Unknown. Get started. So anyway, I'll go to that.
Yep.
And then soon I will be a member of the Facebook group Remote Viewing the Unknown.
So I guess you can place this in a category with a couple of different things. But in the end, it is using your consciousness to learn unknown things.
Okay.
Right, through some sort of process, some sort of ritual, some sort of habit, or some sort of activity. Remote viewing would be one. And the remote viewing, they do sort of drill in on a target location. You can, like I say, the instructions are out there. You can see how to do it.
My understanding is they're not telling you, I want you to look at Soviet Air Base number 22, Building 5. They know that, but they're giving you a random number.
They're giving you coordinates.
They're giving you actual map coordinates.
Like lat long, I believe.
Okay, and then so unless you're some kind of incredible, weird genius, you have no idea where that is.
Right. You just know roughly where it is. And I don't even know if it had to require that you had the physical location. I don't think the process was specific to like a grid of coordinates. You needed some sort of starting point, but I don't know. I've not done it. I've skimmed the documentation on it once. But, you know, you're sort of writing notes about, impressions you get there or whatever. But automatic writing would be something similar to that. Although in that case, that's sort of that mediumship, right? You're, I think, generally interfacing with a spirit, but where you're, putting that pencil in your hand and getting out a fresh notebook and just let your hand start writing.
Now, I have read of automatic writers who were, it's irritating to me. They always use the word unsophisticated, uneducated. This a housewife, just a housewife. As if a housewife couldn't be incredibly brilliant.
Right.
And say, but she was able to write beautiful sonatas. She was able to write complex fiction that was far beyond her capability as a human. Well, first off, how do they know that? But there, as a materialist, there is, when she's finished writing, there is some material.
Right.
You got some pages of paper with stuff she's written. And then I guess you could look at everything else she's written and determine if she was probably capable of that or not. I'm going to say that just about everybody is capable of a lot more than what they show.
So let's say Susie sits down with her notebook, and Susie was educated to a third degree English or third grade English level.
All right,
right?
So enough education to know how to read and do basic math.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when she sits down and does automatic writing, she writes Shakespeare level.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Poetry, plays, whatever.
Unlike many paranormal contentions, unlike many paranormal reports, I don't have to be skeptical about this one because I know it has actually happened. Okay, we've got the records.
Right. Not skeptical about the what.
I'm not
so
skeptical about the what.
The question is the why.
I can certainly be skeptical about the why. I mean, and to me, I think my view is much more humane, and that is the world wants to categorize people into those who are intelligent and capable and those who aren't. And the world's really nasty about that. And Susie, even though she only went to the third grade, really is a hell of a lot smarter than most of the people that are trying to study her.
Okay. All right, that's fair. And by the way, almost all paranormal is about the why.
Oh, that's a good
the
statement.
What.
Okay.
Think of the EVPs that we've gotten.
We've got EVPs. Mm-hmm.
We know that we have them.
Well, we have
the what, but we have no idea why.
We have somewhat mysterious recordings. We have some
that are in English.
In English
language.
What did the last one say? Not an M.
Not an M.
Right, not an M. And then kind of a
Hello, this is Avalon Liam Dankwa Smythe. Aren't you glad I'm back? You certainly should be. Just ask me. Let's hear that particular EVP because it is truly spookalicious. In fact, it's officially spookalicious certified by me, Avalon Liam Dankwa Smythe.
Smackdown. 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 Smackdown.
Yeah, which may have been a microphone bump, or may have been a
chair moving.
That last part could have been, when we listened to it, could have been something physical.
All right, so
vibration.
let's just stick with not an M.
Right. It was clearly speech. It was clearly not Father Justin.
It was a male voice somewhere around 25 or so, and very clear. but fast.
Very fast.
Very fast.
Yep. You had to slow it down to actually hear that there were 3 words. Actually, even 3 syllables, because at normal speed, I thought it was only 2 syllables. Because when I said 3, I included that bump as the 3rd one.
Well, I guess as an atheist, I'm supposed to say that that's local radio interference. Or Zoom is such a complicated thing. Of course, there's occasionally going to be crossover between the 182,000 simultaneous Zoom conversations that are occurring.
Yeah. So this is one that we've talked about and I have thought a lot about.
Yeah.
And that's not it.
Nope.
First of all, if I ran a platform as a former IT architect, if I ran a platform that had any sort of crossover, that would be fixed forthwith. That would be a super priority because you cannot run a platform that big that has anything like that possible within the infrastructure, because if it is, it's going to show up on a mass scale at some point. And that's not the way it works. This is not like phone lines. We don't have physical phone lines and connectors where the operator could have misconnected something or whatever. These are IP packets, and they are directional, they are addressed, they come in small pieces, and you don't have that kind of that crossover happen. Now,
Plus, it would be business suicide if it did.
Yes.
Because someone, sooner or later, would have the crossover of, listen, I need you to sell Tesla when it gets to 214.
Right. You know? Now, I've been on Riverside conferences or live sessions where there was audio artifacts within the system, where there was like echoes, delays, reverbs.
Yeah, but you still weren't getting words from other people's streams.
But not from something outside of our system.
Sure, you're talking electronic artifacts or audio artifacts based upon your particular communication stream.
Yes.
Not from other things.
Not from, the business call to Japan that was happening in the background or something, on the same server.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we know that these things happen. It's always the how or the why that's what makes it paranormal. In most cases, when we look at investigating, right? Oh, I got a light artifact. What is it? How did it happen? Well, maybe it was a moth flying through and at some crazy angle, and you're picking up a flicker of light every time its wings hit the right angle. Or maybe it was an orb that's flashing that there is no moth because it's 5 degrees outside, and moths don't generally fly around when it's 5 degrees outside. So, yeah, it's always about the why. But as far as to take it back, go ahead.
Where do you take the why? I mean, look, of course I believe, since I'm an atheist, I believe that all this stuff is just, there's a why that is totally physical. We just don't know what it is. But as a person who finds this kind of thing kinds of interesting, I mean, to me, EVP is the king of investigative tools.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that if you try long enough to get one, you'll get one.
I believe most people, yes.
Yes, most people. Just you don't have to be anything special. You don't have to spend a lot of money. But if you try to get an EVP, eventually one or several or many will show up.
Yeah, and don't do this at home, folks. We
Right, don't do this at
check
home.
for EAPs. It's sort of like
Now, with the rundown and with Trailer Trash Terrors, that's where I'm recording. You know,
Right.
but I'm not recording. You know, I don't start Trailer Trash Terrors with, "Hey, if there's anybody out there who'd like to communicate with me,
chime on in.
chime on in." What I'm doing a regular interview or a regular show, and they show up.
Right.
They're not being invited.
No. And, you know, there are horror stories in the paranormal world of people who investigate at home. So that is something you do not do. But the why, where do you take the why? I mean, sky's the limit.
One of the things that does bother me, and it's not something that I hold against anybody, but boy, it is really hard. I mean, let's say that EVPs are genuine, which I actually believe they are. There, over time, would be some way of establishing rules of behavior, patterns, likelihoods. You know, some way of breaking down what you had to do in order to get one and how they worked. Now, that takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of cooperation, and it takes somebody coordinating all this. That's real hard.
All right. I don't think that I don't think there's much question about most of that. The inconsistent part of the process that you're always missing is whether or not there's something there to communicate.
Okay.
Whether it wants to communicate or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a strong believer in EVPs. I've got EVPs that are irrefutable. You know, and boy, I mean, that is a strong thing to say to an atheist reductionist.
Strong word there, irrefutable. Okay.
But you've heard them, and some, you've heard some that are not stuff that we've put out on an episode that
Sure.
are, you know, have been from a case that we worked, and there was no question they were EVPs, and some of those act in very different ways than your normal ghosty type EVPs. And I would say that it would be extraordinarily hard for someone to dispute them had they, you know, it always comes down to someone with an atheist scientific type mind is going to go, well, I wasn't there, so I didn't see how you set that up.
And then that's where things get really silly.
But that's just stupid.
Either I trust you as a reliable researcher or I don't.
Right.
Okay. And even as an atheist, I would trust you as a reliable researcher.
Well, thank you, Vic. So,
well, in that I believe you would follow a procedure that you could define, that you would report your findings honestly, and that you wouldn't fabricate anything.
right. So if you take that into account, then I have stuff that's irrefutable.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So then it's just a question of how to get there. And to me, there's only a handful of possibilities. And that comes back to those artifacts represent
Remaining consciousness.
some consciousness.
Some kind of remaining consciousness.
Now, in some scenarios,
What that is, who knows?
I would speculate that they are human spirits that are there. Now, can you go, is that consciousness a human spirit that's stuck, that didn't move on? Is it a human spirit that's in purgatory, working through some crap? I don't know, but it appears to be a human spirit. And this is what this always comes down to on the show with these things. It's always, one of, a handful of
One of a handful of
possibilities.
things, right. Mm-hmm.
It's either that or it's something mimicking a human that was there. Is it demonic, trying to say that it's that's a human? And the irrefutable ones were, in my belief, demonic. But that's because that is the type of environment we were dealing with. So
Demonic in terms of trying to communicate? Honestly, there's no reason a demon couldn't honestly communicate. Or demonic in terms of trying to represent itself as something that it wasn't?
in this case, it was demonic in that it was trying to prove a point, intimidate, what have you, and so it wasn't communicating anything specific, but it was doing something that it normally shouldn't have been able to do.
Okay.
That you wouldn't normally. We had an EVP where the person's voice and speech was repeated.
Yep, I heard that one.
Okay, but closer to the recorder.
Why don't you go ahead and? Do you think it's inappropriate to explain that? You're not mentioning any names. Or anything.
I'll leave it at this high level.
Okay.
The phrase the person said was repeated closer to the microphone, and it sounded like it was being played out of a cheap speaker. So it wasn't a direct repetition. It wasn't a replica, which leaves any kind of process recording problem out of it, right? It still sounded like the person, but not quite the same. It was distorted in that it sounded like it was being played out of a cheap speaker, but it was still very clear, and it was the exact same words.
Was it the exact same timing? If you took the waveform of the first bit of speech, put a new track below that, put the new EVP waveform right in line with it, did all the waves and valleys and peaks line up?
I think we did this, Vic, and I don't remember the outcome of it. I'm not sure it showed up in the waveform. Is partly why. A lot of times the EVPs don't show up in the waveform.
So a lot of times they're so low.
They're quieter.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
My recollection is the cadence was exactly the same. The tone was the same. The voice was the same, but it sounded like it was being replayed. Unless that person got up and very quietly, very quickly hopped across the room and had recorded themselves and played it back through the speaker in the phone in front of the microphone.
Right. This was an elderly woman who made the original recording, right?
No. This was not a woman's voice. But the you would have heard all of that.
Yes,
in
you
the
would
noise
have.
in the room. And so
footsteps
no
and
way
recorders clicking and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, these recorders are super sensitive. And all of that said, I've never had an EVP like that before.
Yeah, I remember that one.
That was fascinating.
So
anyway,
then the question comes down to what kind of consciousness would be bringing something like that about? Do you know what the very first computer memory actually was?
No.
Big rotating drums of mercury. Okay,
I remember something about drums, but it was mercury, huh?
Yeah, it was. So there's mercury, and so you could represent a bit or a byte through tapping on that drum, something like that, and the mercury would bring that waveform all the way around to something that was detecting that.
Okay.
Okay, so that you see where I'm going with this. Okay, where one could at least postulate an idea where consciousness wasn't necessarily involved. It just something in the universe recorded it for whatever reason, and then because there wasn't perfect fidelity, then you got a little bit of a change, but it played it back.
Okay.
Okay, so at least that's an idea of how consciousness could be taken out of the equation. Still doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, in this situation, there was a whole bunch of other stuff that was caught on audio that just
seemed
wasn't
to be
that type of thing.
Right.
But I could see as an explanation, there was some sort of relay of the original speech, but then why not everything else?
Why not everything else? Why did it happen only then?
So
Was there any, and then I guess the question is, was there anything terribly profound about the original statement?
In this situation, yes.
Okay, so that there was meaning in what was said.
Yeah, there was meaning in what was said.
It wasn't just, would you like some coffee?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well,
So,
that to
I don't know.
me seems to strengthen the consciousness being involved argument.
Mm-hmm.
At least it seems.
Yeah, but you look at all of this stuff that happens, whether it's EVPs being recorded, whether it is something captured on video, in the end, there's something behind it. Lots of things have benign explanations. I'm not saying everything's paranormal. It's not all paranormal, man.
No, man. Got to have some mundanity in there somewhere. Well, this stuff's got to be mundane or prosaic. I like that word, prosaic.
Prosaic.
Well, I mean, we're talking about types of consciousness that seem to be acting, but we can't figure out where that consciousness is. I mean, we have no idea. Look, I would say that between the two of us, in the time we've known each other, and JJ and everybody else, man, we've probably encountered 100 different EVPs.
We've hit a bunch.
I mean, 100 different sounds that show up on our recordings that seem to have a purpose, that seem to be created by something with will, and shouldn't be there.
Right.
And ours have been mostly benign. JJ had that one that was freaking frightening.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was a very, very frightening kind of sound.
Well, we had a couple when Father Mike first joined permanently on the show. We had a couple come through that were disturbing, that were not super pleasant.
Well, see, this is one of the, let me bring this back. This is one of the things that I find difficult about the reductionist viewpoint, is because much to their chagrin, there is evidence that's really hard to overlook if you're going to be honest about the situation.
If you're going to be honest,
Okay.
if you're going to give any respect to the sources,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier,
Mm-hmm.
apply any level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
You have so many people out there right now
Mm-hmm.
that 3-4 nights a month minimum are at some haunted location, recording using the same recorders, the same process, the same practices, and gathering EVPs. And, these are people that are not fly-by-night, just bought a recorder and this is their first time. These are people that have done it for years. And it's categorically dismissed as, well, that's not in any type of laboratory environment.
Right.
You don't have control of all the variables. And look.
Yeah, but if you're going out studying sharks, you're on the middle of the Gulf of America and you're trying to study sharks.
Right.
I made Dave laugh there.
Yep.
You don't have control over anything. You have the control to say, I think there are a bunch of sharks over that way. In the past we found sharks over there, or the satellites said that those are good conditions for sharks. Let's go over there. That's really
everything in those environments can be explained.
Okay.
This cannot. Therefore, you apply a higher level of proof,
a higher level of scrutiny to that.
Yeah. And I think it's it's reached a point where it's just unreasonable. I would absolutely love to see some very serious study, research done on this and in gathering EVPs. And
well, just once again, submit a grant for that. Okay. Can we talk about one more thing?
Absolutely.
One more thing. We haven't done much smacking down tonight. But
well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that the atheist reductionist is really losing this argument.
I think you're right.
He doesn't have enough flower power for his arguments, man.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. What do we have written down here next? Well, the word that has been written down here is magic.
Okay.
M-A-G-I-C-K. And then beneath that, I've written manipulation of reality through the expression of will. Through whatever means required. Prayer, meditation, spells, curses, jinxes, you name it.
Yeah. So this is that next logical step. We talk about consciousness right now. With consciousness, you have will. You have willpower.
Mm-hmm. You do.
And
even I will admit that, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that will is expressed and realized in certain ways. If I want to smack down an atheist, I pick up my hand and smack. That will is expressed, right? I do a Denozo slap on the forehead. Or back of the head. And so I'm expressing my intent there. But then if you take...
Who's Denozo?
Oh, it's NCIS.
Okay, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you've been Denozo'd, you pop
no,
on the back of the
I know.
head.
It's Mark Harmon. Denozo has missed something obvious. And it's like, dumbass.
Smacks him on the back of the head. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So there are, if you think about psychic abilities, you look at telekinesis.
Okay.
The idea, I'm going to bend this spoon with my mind, the Uri Geller thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking your consciousness and expressing your will through some technique to bend that spoon.
Okay.
Well, magic is no different. You are creating a structured process of ritual words, actions that is taking your will and expressing it and for it to be realized somehow. And that would be, through some, gut a chicken, draw a pentagram, I don't know, whatever. You're using something unseen in the middle of that process to go from I want this done to it gets done.
Have you seen examples of this in action?
No. Let's see.
Because I went into some voodoo shops off of Bourbon Street.
Mm-hmm.
There are quite a few voodoo shops in that area of New Orleans. They move them over a street or two because they'd like Bourbon Street to be where there's a whole lot of beads.
Money
and
spent.
Jazz. What's that?
Money spent.
Money spent. Yeah. Well, a lot of money spent on Bourbon Street. So you move the voodoo shops over a few streets, but they must do some really, really good psychological manipulation, because even an atheist like myself, when I go in there, I feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's probably the cant of the room. The direction is maybe a little warped on the door frame.
Right, they're doing anything they can to make me feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
It could also be that they're drawers full of stuff that smell really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Things that smell really bad. And, it says stuff like, dried iguana tail.
Yeah, that doesn't sound particularly pleasant. I've not seen rituals performed, but I have certainly read enough about them and talked with plenty of people who performed them. There's a way more of that goes on than I think most people realize. And the question is how effective is it really?
Well, there are quite a few Catholics who live around me, and I watch them. And boy, these guys are some crossing masters. They love to cross themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's sort of a magical ritual. I mean, you're doing something with the idea of affecting something else.
Oh, you are... Think beyond that. Think about the St. Benedict's medal that I wear around my neck.
Right. You attribute some degree of protection to that.
There is ritual that is performed on that medal to exercise and bless it before I wear it.
Mm-hmm.
The words on it represent a prayer, which is very similar to what would be an incantation or a spell, depending upon how you look at it. Now, as Christians, we don't look at them as that thing, but there is definitely ritual. I mean, look, the Roman ritual is a ritual. It's
a ritual. You're right. Yeah, it's it's Roman, by the way, just in case you hadn't caught that. It's Roman. But you're right. I mean, there are specific words which could certainly be thought of as incantations. There are specific garments you're supposed to be wearing, which could be the witch doctor outfit. I mean, yes, you've got a very formalized kind of set of activities and rules to try to manipulate reality.
So the difference is in each of these things, the Christian is requesting for God to do something.
Correct.
For Jesus to do something.
Mm-hmm.
The power is not considered to be in the person or even the object. We use holy water. Holy water is exorcised and blessed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, if you get it done in the old rite, it's not exorcised anymore in the new rite, I don't think. It's different. But
so I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, you know that there are quite a few witches in the world, or people who call themselves witches, and they have Zoom meetings too. They have ways of getting together and planning their activities. And they stated, oh gosh, I guess it was about a month ago, that hey, look, we're sending all kinds of powerful, limiting, dangerous spells toward Donald Trump, and something's blocking them. So they're not getting to him. We can feel that our spells aren't reaching the president. Not joking, Dave. I'm telling you, this is.
No, I know. I'm just wondering if half of our listeners are steaming right now, and the other half are smiling.
Well, look. I mean, it doesn't matter which side you're on. Okay. I mean, if you're on the side of those sending the spells, then it's at least worth examining as, why are they not getting to their target? And if you're on the other side, what's preventing them from getting to their target?
Right.
I mean, it's kind of the same question on both sides. Except I, as an atheist, say that the witches are just out there play acting.
Right.
They're just simply being silly. If you want to go out and stand naked by the lake and, spread chicken feathers around and do silly dances and send your spells outward, fine. Not hurting me. It seems like an odd way to spend your time. Then you wonder, surreptitiously, do men like Donald Trump and Keir Starmer and, various other world leaders, do they surreptitiously hire people who can supposedly protect them from these spells? Are there?
I hadn't thought about that.
Look, the president can pretty much hire anybody he wants.
Counter spells.
And so your title is, speech reviewer. You got to sit in this office and review speeches, and we send them to you. But really, what you're doing is you're, building these defenses against the spells. So I don't see why any of that would alienate either side of the argument. I mean, it's just simply another type of warfare.
Right. So what it is some sort of expression of intent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, the kung fu on one side is stronger than the kung fu on the other.
Mm-hmm. Or as the atheist, you would go just plain dumb luck.
Well, no, as an atheist, I can be really fascinated by the fact that there are naked women dancing around a lake in Scotland and there was a picture of these women, kind of far away, so you didn't really get to see anything, but you were aware that, they're scantily clad, if not naked. And they were confused. Okay, so those people felt that usually their spells accomplished what they wanted them to accomplish.
Okay. So enough.
So this was
real, tangible evidence in their life to say this normally works.
This normally works, right?
Not an N of one.
Not an N of one. Yeah, this normally works. Okay, so their view of the world was that this magic, whatever they were doing, on a frequent basis at least, has the intended effect. I mean, where does that stop? I mean, do they use similar spells to make sure their daughters get good dates to the prom? Are they, doing spells to try to keep the piston rings on their cars from wearing out?
I think they probably generalized that. Just keep the car running.
Keep the car running.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, I have this very weird very practical mind. Like, okay, if you're going to take the time to drive out to the lake, get a bunch of your buddies together, take off all your clothes in Scotland, which is pretty cold, by the way, and humid, and it's a yucky place to be naked. And you're going to do these dances and send these spells out. It must be that these people think they're actually getting something from that.
Right.
And I wonder, and then I guess, once again, as an atheist, I wonder, well, okay, how come you're not doing an annual report?
Well, I'm kind of fascinated by the other side of this equation.
Yeah.
Is it a bunch of guys with red ties, blue suits gathered around a boardroom board table?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And they must have some protective mechanism. So, well, anyway, I think the bottom line is I think we need to study this in a much more reasonable and considered manner than we're doing tonight, because I'm making some jokes, and I hope I haven't made anybody angry about the jokes. But hey, a lot of this stuff is worth joking about.
Absolutely,
it's pretty funny.
I think it's a fascinating topic. The idea of magic as a whole. And it's, there's all different types. There's all different forms of it. But in the end, I guess you would classify it maybe in two different possible ways. One is a way of focusing your power to do something in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe three ways. The other way is asking the universe to do something for you. Right? Just the big no individual, just the universal energy you're harnessing to do something. And then the third would be asking some sort of deity or entity to do something for you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the first one of those is your consciousness implementing your will.
Okay. And if you're going to be effective at that, your consciousness has to be organized, powerful, and focused.
Yes. So it is a focusing mechanism for you. The second one is there is a general, and we've talked about this before, a general energy out there that can be harnessed just like air, water, wind, fire, harnessed to perform some activity, to implement your intent, and you need to focus it. So your ritual is a way of focusing that energy, that general thing, through some general witchcraft spell or whatever.
Gotcha.
And then the third is a ritual that is pleading to some sort of entity, and you have to follow certain steps in order for them to respond. And that would be like the Crowley type of ritual, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that one to me has always seemed like it's, kind of like drawing upon the power of the huge evil monster to do your bidding. Mm-hmm. You might be able to cajole or persuade him or her, don't want to be sexist here, might be able to persuade or cajole the monster to do your bidding for a while. But if he ever gets pissed at you, if he ever decides that you've broken the rules or stepped on his toes or in any way offended him, you're in a really vulnerable situation there.
Pretty much. I don't think that ends well.
Have you seen the movie Cabin in the Woods?
No, you talked about it though. I still haven't seen that.
Well, we need to have a watch party to watch Cabin in the Woods. Now, it's basically the Lovecraftian world is the real world. Okay? Deep in the earth, there are the sleeping great old ones. These huge, incredible monsters. Mm-hmm. And every so often, there has to be a ritual to keep them sleeping. Okay, or they're going to wake up and destroy the world. And they've set it up to where there are, let's say, a dozen rituals around the world, maybe more. And all of them have a chance of keeping the great old ones asleep. And the way that you keep them asleep is you sacrifice a very specific group of people. You've got the Adonis, the athlete, this beautiful kind of male. You've got the whore, this, seductive woman. You've got the fool, which is in this movie a pothead, who really knows how to protect himself with his bong. You've got the virgin.
Hey man, those bongs could be useful.
Very useful. You've got the virgin. It seems like there's another one, but let's say that's the scholar. Okay, so there's these archetypes. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you've got a compound with hundreds of people working in it, and their only job is, let's say, once a year to do this ritual. And so they go out, they find people, and they manipulate them into going into the situation, and they have got to choose the challenge. Okay, what is the challenge? In Cabin in the Woods, they they get them down into this basement where there are all these different artifacts. Tell me if this is too far off. But all these different artifacts. And depending on what artifact they choose, that's the challenge they've got to face. Okay. And so they pick up an old book and they start reading it, and it's the story of this degraded redneck family, cannibalistic family, and they worship pain.
Okay.
and they're reading this book, and it's really well done. And so they've chosen this family. Well, then, of course, they rise up out of the ground, and if they go and they kill all these different archetypes, then the great old ones stay asleep. But in this instance, it doesn't work. They end up killing the Adonis. They end up killing the whore. They end up killing the scholar. But the fool and the virgin kind of end up escaping.
Okay.
They find the tunnel to the big compound, and things get interesting. So there's some kind of mystical thing controlling all this. So when the Adonis dies, it's like NASA Central. Okay, the Adonis is dead, and everybody enters something on their computer, and you see a flask filling up a void in the stone. But then they say this prayer, real quick. Like, great old ones, because of the death of the Adonis, we ask that thee stay asleep for eternity. And I didn't get that right.
Well, it doesn't matter.
But it's something like that. Man, I got to tell you, that is a movie that really covers a lot of these things in terms of will, magic, whatever, impacting the world. Mm-hmm. Because if they're able to kill all these people, then, through rules that are set up in the ritual, then the great old ones stay asleep.
So this is the question.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take this to the real world, but just having set it up with that. who set up the rules that cause the ritual to work?
Don't know. That's a really good question. Who sets up those rules?
So in my mind, the ritual is almost like a contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do this, X, Y, and Z, and I will do this, whatever is the implementation of your will.
Okay. Then there's a part of that that's unstated, and that you're doing the requesting. I'm doing the changing, but you owe me.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe. No, I think that the ritual...
The ritual is the payment?
The steps of the ritual fulfill the payment.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
Sacrifice.
why somebody has to die.
Yeah, or something has to, some critter has to die, or you have to perform some act that you would not normally have done. Whatever it is, that is the fulfillment of the payment side of the contract. Now, in order for that to work, that means that both parties have to agree here. So I, as the requester, and you, as the fulfiller, have to agree that this is how we're going to do business. If you're the one who's going to be bound by this, going to be fulfilling it, that means that, in all likelihood, you're the one who wrote up the contract.
Okay.
Right? You set up the rules on what you're going to do for me if I jump through these hoops. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do that because somebody else said, hey, if you say this, then he's going to have to do this for you. That doesn't make any sense. It's got to be you're the one who's involved, which, of course, would also mean that you're free to just not do it. You're doing it because you want something out of it.
Yeah, correct.
And that may have absolutely nothing to do with what the, quote, payment is for services rendered, which I think is what you were getting to, which is maybe there is a certain amount of subjugation or I'll owe you, but it's not even implied. It's not even known by the person doing it.
Well,
that's requesting.
Or it's like the drug dealer. Yeah, the first magical act is free. But after the first magical act, man, you're paying full price.
Yeah. But that is who sets up those rules. It's either got to be the one executing the activity or some overarching system that is set up that entity is bound by.
Well, there are hundreds of stories from all cultures of what is essentially the Crossroads Demon.
Right.
Okay. You go out to the crossroads, you dig a hole in the middle, you put a box in there, and it's got, I don't know, your neighbor's teeth, or it's got some blood or some chicken feathers or bad Twinkies. I don't know what is supposed to go into the box that summons the demon.
I'm pretty sure it's very clear in a Supernatural episode, but I don't recall it.
I don't remember them ever giving you the ingredients. But the ingredients do seem to matter. And I can go into other things where the ingredients matter. But then the idea is the Crossroads Demon comes. You ask a particular thing. They agree to do it. But then you give up your soul. I mean, that's the payment.
Right.
That's the payment. Now, as an atheist, of course, I can go out there and say, yeah, dang right, you can have my soul. And then, and I'm happy as a clam because I ain't got one.
And I'll sell it to you again next week.
I'll sell it to you again next week. But But this is a real common thing throughout the world. You know, that you can make a deal with a preternatural or paranormal entity. And once you've made that deal, they own something very important. They own something that's part of you.
I think they're all preternatural.
Yeah, okay.
I can't imagine a situation where it would be someone that has been human fulfilling that contract, right? It might not be a, quote, demon, but it's going to be some...
Well, Crowley had been human.
Okay, so their idea of demons...
Yeah, but their ideas of demons, a demon in the supernatural universe, what did Dean say? It's a pain-in-the-ass ghost?
Yeah, well, it's someone who's... It's human spirit that's gone to hell and been turned, right? Been tortured until it's,
Right.
I don't know. I can't think offhand, and maybe there is one, any religious belief that subscribes that, human souls become demons.
Well, I'm not aware of any other than fiction.
Right.
Okay, I'm not aware of any scripture that says human souls become demons. That kind of thing. I think, look, I love the Supernatural show. I think it's a funny, brilliant thing.
Oh, it's great.
Except for the Leviathan season.
Yeah, but he really was a good bad guy.
He really was a good bad guy. That's true.
It's all in the marketing.
But once again, consciousness is at the center of this. Consciousness and will is at the center of this. Humans trying to manipulate the will of something that isn't human. But that also must have consciousness.
Has to have consciousness.
Has to have consciousness. All right, we are at the 2.5 hour point in the abbreviated or the poorly populated Paranormal Rundown, which was just us two. Is there anything else we need to, since we got through one paragraph of the 7 paragraphs I've written here, which isn't surprising. But
well, consciousness is a big topic.
Oh, yes. Consciousness is a very big topic.
It's at the core of everything. So,
well, perhaps at some point when we have more people available, we can revisit this.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other things that we need to do. Next time we end up having to do a show by ourselves, I think we should probably revisit Magick to a certain degree. The next areas are cryptids, physical things that either do or do not exist, aliens, demons, and it goes on from there. So the Paranormal Rundown is designed to never run out of things to talk about.
Yes, it is. And there's always a different angle. All
right. Well, Dave, I don't think we did much smacking down tonight.
I don't know. I think you failed miserably as an atheist to prove your points.
Boy, I have
but
to. Yeah, but it's kind of like I'm trying to think of some good analogy. I mean, it's like boy, it's hard to be something you're not. It really is, especially with as little prep as I had on that. I should probably, go follow some atheists around and get them to, watch the way they explain things. Heck, all I got to do is go to Reddit, I guess. But
yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, I'm going to say thank you for making this episode possible. Really should not be that difficult to edit this. This should be pretty darn easy.
Nope, I think we're good.
I mean, very, cut out a little bit, add a little bit of Avalon, let Cedric say a few things. If I would like from the audience, I want some feedback on Cedric and Avalon. I mean, they're not going away. I like Cedric and I like Avalon. But it can take a little while to get them to say the things they say. So I guess I'd like to know how the audience feels about them generally and if they would like them to do anything additional.
Just keep in mind, Avalon should give you nightmares. So be nice. Be kind.
Well, Avalon can definitely give you nightmares. She is. So you think Avalon is creepier or Annabelle?
In order to not risk offending either of them, they are equally creepy.
All right, I'm going to tell you something about them. Annabelle, Avalon, Boudreaux, they all do things I don't expect them to do.
Are you telling us something about them or something about you, Vic?
Probably both. But I mean, I'll be figuring out what Avalon is going to say, and my mind just kind of goes blank and my fingers type. And there's something there that makes sense, which is exactly what Avalon should be saying at the time. Like the whole thing about the Snifflebottom Biggerstaff family. Where'd that come from?
Well,
I mean,
as a disembodied artificial intelligence,
yeah.
Avalon does have her own consciousness, and she is simply saying some sort of spell to have that consciousness affect your reality and cause you to do the things that she wants you to do.
That's perfectly fine.
I'm sure that she has quite the spell room.
Oh, I would think
Candles
so. Yeah.
burning, ancient books on the wall.
Maybe a dungeon.
We'll talk about the dungeon. It's dark there. I don't like it.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and do the ending for the Paranormal Rundown, since I may have offended Avalon, and I don't really want to risk that. The Paranormal Rundown is a production of Gang of Nerds Media. Gang of Nerds Media is, of course, composed of myself, Dave Griffith, J.J. Johnson, Father Michael Birdsong, his son Josh Birdsong, and occasional guests when we get them. Whatever music we use comes from Lobo Loco, Smart Sound, or is in the public domain. We hardly use any media clips, but when we do, they are protected under the Fair Use Doctrine. We really, really would like to hear from you more than we do. And you can make that possible by writing to us at feedback
at paranormalrundown.com.
Let's say it one more time. Feedback at paranormalrundown.com. Hey, that's easy. I know that we said some things that have either made you think, or made you angry, or made you think that we are utter idiots. But write to us and let us know. Also, look, I'm also certain that if you're the kind of person that's listening to the Paranormal Rundown, you've got some thoughts that we'd probably like to hear. So why don't you let us know and be a guest on the Paranormal Rundown? Probably isn't all that hard. Just prove that you can speak English with some reasonable alacrity, that you can manipulate ideas, and that you have a sense of humor, and man, you're in like Flint. Anything you'd like to add to that, Dave?
No, that covers it.
All right.
Be sure to check out the X account.
The X account, right. Which is
Paranormal Run DN.
Paranormal Run DN. Okay. Hey, listen, thanks. Thanks for putting up with this. I think it worked out. I mean, I'd give us at least a B+.
You with rating things lately.
Yeah, I mean, I rate everything.
It's just good. It's all good.
I rate everything. Every time I make a meal for my wife, I'll, lay it in front of her. We'll be at the table. She'll dig in, start eating, and I won't touch it. I'll just sit there and look at her, kind of looking at her face. And most of the time, she's forgotten about it. It's just she's eating some food she likes. Then I'll finally say, well, what do you think? And then she'll say, oh, it's good. Almost always, it's good. Every once in a while, I'll get a, And And that's like the big reward. So is there anything you'd change? And then I'll taste it and I'll say, okay, I'm going to give this a B plus or an A minus. I rarely get below a B.
Well, for the record, on the show, if you're going to rate things, it always needs to be in the A range.
In the A range,
because when you say it's a B plus, I'm like,
no, I said at least a B plus.
Why aren't we re-recording it and giving them an A plus show?
Okay, well, we'll leave that to Avalon and Cedric. Thank you, everybody, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Good night.
Good night.